In the last few sessions, I introduced you to the concept of the circle of fifths and basically how you can use it to determine what notes comprise what scale. But as I mentioned, when you're working with minor scales, you do have to make some changes to the notes because, well, the circle of fifths only reveals the natural minor scale. We know that when we're working with chords, we want to cadense, and the best and most natural way to do this is by moving from the V to the I, the dominant to the tonic. But what makes that relationship so strong is the middle note of the dominant chord. It's the leading tone. But when we're working in a minor scale, we find that the dominant chords are minor, not major. And because of that, we had to deliberately augment that middle tone, that bottom interval, up by a semitone to convert the chord into a major chord. And by being a major chord, we could cadense properly from V to I, and we were using the leading tone as the bottom interval. Now, we also have to play around a little with the scales when we want to write melodies. Why? Well, we know that music is based around the tonic, the key of the music. It's the very reason music has a key. When we write musical parts, whether it's a bass line, harmony, or even a melody, it all centres around the key of the music. I mean, of course, we don't continually just play the tonic note. If we did, music would sound particularly repetitive. But if you recall in Fundamental4, after we'd chosen a key, we had a collection of strong and weak notes. The key of the music basically told us what notes were strong and what notes would be weak. And if you recall in the last DVD on harmony, we had the same basic kind of thing. After we'd chosen a key, we could build chords, and the progression was based around this strong and weak movement. We had strong progressions moving strong to strong, and then we moved strong to weak to produce a weak progression. In every event so far, we've always referred to our notes or our chords as strong and weak. Now, I must stress yet again here that there's no strong and weak notes or chords. It's just how I like to describe them to help with learning music. So don't go to a music college or speak to a musician about strong and weak. Otherwise, well, they're just going to think you're nuts. But between you and me, when we were building bass lines and we decided upon a key, we had that strong and weak relationship. It helped us build bass lines, and we did the same with chords. It helped us build chords. Now, the reason we had this strong-weak relationship all comes down to the key of the music. It's a fact that just some notes are more at home with the key of the music than others, and the reason for that is because some notes have a strong harmonic relationship with the key of the music, while others, it's just not strong, and this is in effect known as tonality. Basically, we can say that some notes just tend to lean more towards the home note, the key of the music, than others because of this harmonic relationship. So when we write music, we try to use mostly strong to let everyone know that our music has that definite key. But we also tend to mix in some weaker notes or chords so that we don't sound too nursery rhyme-ish, so we don't sound too childish or predictable in the music. So let's say, for example, we're going to write a piece of music and we're starting with a chord progression. Well, the first thing we want to do is choose a key. So let's choose G minor. Now, looking at the circle of fifths there, can you tell me what the notes in G minor would be? Well, first of all, we can see it's 2 notches away from C, and we're counting counterclockwise. So we know it's got 2 flats in it. And Father Christmas got Dad an electric blanket. So we know that it will be E flat, B flat. So basically the notes in G minor are going to be G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F. Now, a lot of musicians start with the chords first because basically you can draw the melody and the bass line from a chord structure. It's not something I want to discuss now. We will look at this later, but you can take the melody and the bass line from your chords. So basically we could say that I'm going to write in G harmonic minor simply because I need to cadense at the end. I need to move from V to I, and that dominant chord has to be a major to create that push, that feeling of returning home to the key of the music. So for this, basically, I augment the 7th note, creating my harmonic minor key. So basically, the notes would really consist of G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F sharp. Now, from a purely theoretical point of view, that means I should write my entire track in G harmonic minor, not just the harmony, because, well, the whole point of music is to ensure it all gels together, all the instruments harmonise with one another. Now, if you think back to Fundamental4 when we looked at the bass in the bass DVD, we wrote our bass line in natural minor. We didn't use a harmonic minor. But that's okay, because if you think about it, there's only one note difference between G natural minor and G harmonic minor. It's the F and the F sharp. So basically, we could always say that if we use the natural minor to write our bass, then the leading tone of our natural minor could just be an accidental note, and that's okay. The thing is, though, if we go back in time to the 1700s, it was far from okay. Accidental notes and even introducing weak chords into a strong progression was seen as enticing the devil by the church. You were working in league with Lucifer, and the church frowned upon you for such activities. It was so severe it could even result in death. However, musicians were a cheeky bunch, so they often slipped in the odd accidental and weak chord, but then they quickly disguised it by moving to a strong note, so as not to upset the church and not really draw attention to their music. Anyway, for composers to stay on the right side of the church and apparently God, the theory of the day was rather strict. There was no accidental notes and no weak chords. Anything that didn't harmonise well and flow along was seen as the work of the devil. You were in league with Lucifer. Now, of course, back in the 1700s, there were no bass lines either, so all we essentially had to work with was melody and harmony. When I say we there, I'm not suggesting I was writing music back in the 1700s. I'm not that old. I'm speaking in a more literal sense here. You know what I mean. Anyway, in the time before bass lines, back in the 1700s, you basically had harmony and melody. So by writing a harmony in G harmonic minor, my melody should be in G harmonic minor too. If it wasn't, I'd be enticing the devil and probably be strung up by the church. Now, the thing is, that posed a problem because back then, chord progressions were played by violins and such like, but the melodies were performed by choirs, and it's actually incredibly difficult to sing in a harmonic minor key. Why? Well, I'm glad you asked, because if we examine the notes of G harmonic minor there, we have G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F sharp. Now that looks fine, but the problem comes in with the last two notes. We're moving E flat to F sharp. Now that's a full tone and a half movement. You see, the thing is that we as humans like to sing and perform in either semitone or tone movements, and if you ask us to move up a tone and a half, well, it's actually incredibly difficult to perform. Even our best performers today, and by that I'm excluding Miley Cyrus. Why is she making music and films? It just annoys me. Anyway, even our best performers today find it incredibly difficult to move by a tone and a half. Believe me, if you write a track for a vocalist and only move by semitones, they'll love you forever. If you move mostly by semitones, they'll like you a lot. If you move mostly by full tones, well, they'll put up with you. But if you move by a tone and a half, they probably wouldn't even turn up for you. Maybe that's my mistake. My vocalists seem to refuse to turn up half the time. We're shopping. You see, it's not that they can't sing that note. It's just that vocalists are used to moving by either semitones or tones. Not a tone and a half, not a tone and a semitone. It's such a strange tonal movement that it's really difficult to determine exactly where that pitch lies. And if you get it wrong, you're going to make an idiot of yourself. Never underestimate the ego of a vocalist, believe me. You got to remember that the only auto-tune they had back in the 1700s was some guy sitting in the wings coughing loudly to try and cover bum notes. And on top of that, back then, they just loved embellishments and ornamentation, trills and such like. And with a tone and a half jump, you can't really pull off a fast trill. So basically, the composers of the day needed to come up with a viable solution to the problem. Now, it didn't take long for composers to reach a compromise. What they did is they determined that if you took the natural minor scale and raised the 7th leading tone to create the harmonic minor scale, but then also raised the 6th note too, there's no longer that tone and a half problem at the end. Now, this solved the problem because it meant that choirs could perform the melody and the music remained harmonious because, well, the melodic scale maintained the augmented 7th tone, and because the music remained harmonious, the church were fine with it. Now, you're probably going to be sat there thinking, well, why is this relevant to today's dance music? Well, the thing is, when composers began to use this new scale, they noticed that the augmented 6th and 7th notes really added something special to the music. It injected kind of an additional drive and energy that the natural scale just didn't have. And the melody seemed to exhibit more of a tonality. It leaned more towards the key of the music. And it's because of that energetic tonal feel that we still use that melodic minor scale to this day. But there's an important caveat here, and the thing is that whilst the melodic scale sounds fantastic when you're playing up the scale, it sounds really weird when you move down the scale. If you play down the scale with an augmented 6th and 7th, it just sounds weird. It sounds rushed, a bit tense. It ruins the feel of the music, and choirs struggled with that movement too. Now, the composers of the day, 1700s, quickly realised that, so they came to the conclusion that if they're playing up the scale, they'd augment the 6th and 7th notes, but if we're playing down the scale, they'd revert to the natural minor. So have a listen now to how the melodic minor is different from the natural minor. I'll play up now. This is the melodic minor. Now compare that to the natural minor. Can you hear there how the melodic minor has more of a drive? Now, because of that, ideally you should write your lead instrument, whatever that lead is, using the melodic minor scale. Basically, you should use the melodic minor scale for anything that's the driving force of the music, anything that's melodic. So, if, for example, you're writing bass line or garage, you should use the melodic minor scale for the bass line, because in a nutshell, all bass line and garages is a melody played by a bass. Now, this is bound to raise a question here of a standard bass line. Do you use melodic or natural minor for a bass line? Well, it's up to you, and it depends on the action of your bass line in the music. Good music is about balance. So if your music has an active melody that's dancing up and down the scale, you shouldn't have your bass line dancing up and down the scale too, or your chords prancing all over the scale. Your bass and chords should be used to hold a rhythmic pattern to the music while the melody dances up and down the scale, dancing around the rhythm created by the chords and the bass. So if you have a complex melody like electro or hands in the air trance, the chords and the bass are generally relatively simple, and in that case you can use the natural minor for the bass line. But if the bass is all over the place and the melody is restrained, then it may be preferable to use the melodic minor on the bass line and use a natural minor for the melody. Or you can, if you want, use melodic minor for both the bass and the melody. I mean, it doesn't matter. Just what you've got to bear in mind is this is theory, not a rule. Nobody ever wrote a series of rules on music. All the theory is a result of years of critical listening and coming up with theories on how it works and why it works. So, as ever, with these DVDs, you need to experiment with all the options and listen to what you feel produces the best results for your music. Now, staying with the subject of theory for a little longer, and before we move on to the next session to look at the circle of fifths again, I do want to introduce you to a little known concept known as the major melodic scale. Now, I bet very few of you have heard of this one. Basically, in this scale, the 6th and 7th notes are flattened. Now, if you're thinking about this, it means that we're potentially introducing a problem here, because we're diminishing the seventh note of the scale. We're dropping it by a semitone, and that's our leading tone. And remember that the leading tone to tonic has an incredibly important relationship. Now, this is why the melodic major scale is rarely heard of, because it doesn't tend to resolve itself quite right. It gives off more of a, how can I describe it? An Eastern feel to the music, or, well, I think it does anyway, but I thought it's worth mentioning here in case you wanted to give it a go for your music. You know what I mean? Give it a try and see what you think. You might think it sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to play it for you because, well, I'm not doing your job for you. You play with it, see what you think and how you think it sounds. And on that note, what I want to do is I want to move on to the next session, where I want to look a little deeper at the circle of fifths and how it can help us when we're writing melodies and music.